Hi friends, welcome back to Calm in the Chaos Homeschool. Today I wanted to share with you more of our personal journey and kind of my story and my background and then how my children joined my family and how we ended up homeschooling at this point. So if you're interested in hearing all about that, stick around, and I have my cup of coffee here, so go ahead and grab your cup of coffee. I had to reheat this. I don't know, this is about my 6th time I've reheated the coffee and it's still pretty much full. So go ahead and reheat that coffee that's sitting around, or get a new fresh cup of coffee and join me for this little chat. All right, so I was actually homeschooled myself. I grew up in Taiwan. My parents were missionaries in Taiwan, and I was born there. Then we came back from when I was 3 to 6, and then we went back to Taiwan, I guess actually more of a 5. We went back to Taiwan when I was 5, and my first school experience was in a Chinese kindergarten. I think my parents had just moved to Taiwan, and they probably wanted us to learn the language, so they put us in a Chinese kindergarten and probably needed to get some stuff done, and it was just half day. And it was fine. I didn't love it. I actually tried to run away one day, and thankfully my parents never made me go back after that day that I tried to run away. So a few months of Chinese kindergarten, and after that, when it was time to start 1st grade, my mom taught me from then. So from 1st grade to 11th grade, and I know that was my parents' plan when they moved there. So from 1st to 11th grade, I was homeschooled. And in Taiwan, there weren't any, other than going to a Chinese school, which was a totally different educational system. My parents didn't think that that would be the best for us. Other than that, they really had no option other than to homeschool us or send us away about 4 hours to go to a school 4 hours away. And of course, they didn't want to do that. So we were homeschooled back in the 90s, kind of by default. That's kind of what you had to do. So my homeschooling experience was very different, I think, from what many people experience nowadays. There were not as many curriculum options. We did the ACE PACES. That's basically what we did. And we did a bit of Abeka in high school, and probably some Bob Jones, and more eclectic towards the end. But that's kind of my homeschooling experience. So when I got into 12th grade, my parents did send me to the Christian American school that was 4 hours away. And so I stayed there in the dorms, and that was my first kind of school experience other than my Chinese kindergarten experience. And I think my parents did that because they knew that once I went to university, I would not only be in a completely different country and different culture, but then also a totally different schooling system. And so I think it was their way of just preparing me to be ready to be schooled in a different way, and just to be around other foreigners, as we called them there, foreigners, or people from North America. I didn't have a ton of experience with people from Canada or the US at that point. So when I graduated from high school, I took 1 year off. I went to the Philippines and did a discipleship training program there, a six-week kind of Bible study, missionary work sort of thing. Went back to Taiwan. I taught English to save up money for university. And at 19, I went to Canada, which is where my parents were from, and moved in to the dorms at a university in Canada. So once in Canada at university, I met my husband probably about 6 months in to university. We dated for a really long time. We got married when I graduated with my BA, and then I went on to get my teaching degree, which was a 1-year additional schooling once we were married, and we were living in Canada at the time. So once I graduated from university, I was actually having a hard time finding teaching jobs, and what I was doing was I was still tutoring and teaching English, which is something I did starting when I was 14 in Taiwan, and it wasn't really why I got my degree. So eventually we chose to move to the US in hopes that I could get a teaching job down here. And 1 year later, I got a teaching job up in Canada, even though we had moved to the US. So I just commuted. We live very close to the border. It was not a bad commute at all. And so I taught up in Canada for a few years across the border. And so that's kind of my background. Okay, so then at some point we started wanting to start our family, and my husband and I both always really wanted to adopt. He has 2 adopted siblings and I don't have any adopted siblings, but it's always something that was kind of on our heart. So we always wanted to adopt children, and so we first adopted a little girl from Taiwan. So she was actually born in my hometown, which was really neat. And so at 1 year old, we went and we picked her up from Taiwan and brought her home. And thankfully, well, when we moved to the US, we had a very supportive church family, and they were just wonderful in helping us as we were new parents and new parents of an adopted child. Just super helpful, and a great village to help us with our child. It was about 2 years later when I started thinking about foster care, and not really starting to think about foster care. I'd always wanted to do foster care, but I thought that I needed to be a stay-at-home mom in order to do that. And I was still working full-time outside of the home. And I just felt, I think, God prompting me to, and kind of said to me that you just can't wait till things are perfect. You just need to jump in and do it. So on my birthday of that year, we started taking the foster care parenting classes. And by December of that year, we were licensed. And we got a phone call right after the new year. Well, the lady was asking us sort of what we were looking for, and I kind of said, well, our daughter's almost 3, and we think we can do a sibling set. We knew it was hard to find placements for siblings, so a sibling set of 2. We were not ambitious enough to say 3, but a sibling set of 2. And I said, one could be younger than her and maybe one older than her. And as I was talking about that, she had two children who came to her mind. And she started telling me about these 2 children who were living in separate foster homes because they didn't have anywhere to place them together, and they'd been in foster care about maybe 8 or 9 months at the time, and it looked like they were headed towards being needing adoption, and we did want to foster to adopt. That was our goal. So as she was telling me about these 2 children, I definitely felt in my heart that God was telling me that those 2 kids need to come home with me. So it was a few weeks later. We had a few overnight, like they slept at our house, and a few weekends with them just to see if it was a good fit. And after a few weeks, they moved in with us permanently. And so it took a while before we were able to adopt them officially, but eventually we had our adoption ceremony, and then we had 3 children. And then it was probably it was about 9 months after the official adoption when we started feeling like, okay, maybe it's time to do another foster to adopt. We were kind of like, well, if it's foster, that's fine, but if it moves towards adoption, of course. If we have a child in our home who we are fostering and they need to be adopted, how could we say no to that? So we were kind of thinking about that, and it was time for us. We decided to move. So we moved into a larger home that summer, and we were planning on reopening our license or taking more children in the fall after we've done our vacations. And so we had a few vacations planned, airplane tickets down to California, and we moved in. It was 3 weeks in. We were putting up the bed in our guest room, and I got a phone call from a good friend of mine, and she was down at the social office, and she had a little boy on her lap, and she asked me, she's like, so I know that you're planning on doing more foster care, and I know you were thinking a little boy younger than your current boy, and I have a little boy on my lap right now, and he needs a place to go today. And is the only reason why you're not fostering now because of your vacations? Because if it is, I will take him while you're gone. And so I called my husband, and he said, yes, he can come. So that day we had our 4th child join our family. And so he was 3, he was almost 4 when he joined us. And as it is with new children into a new home, coming from the circumstances that they come from, it was really a challenge. That year especially was a lot of challenge. He was very developmentally delayed, and eventually we discovered that not only was he delayed because of how he was treated, but also he has autism. So, I mean, at that point, it didn't really matter. He's actually, since then, he is super bright, super inquisitive. He just picks things up super easily, but he just has those very persistent tendencies where he really is focused on what he wants to be focused on. Anyways, he joined our family at that point. So up until recently, my kids were all in public school. Even though I had homeschooled before, I wasn't opposed to homeschooling, but I was nervous about it, I think because my kids did have special needs and some learning difficulties and learning challenges, and I just thought that the people at school probably could teach them better than I could, even though I had a teaching degree. But really, once March of 2020 hit, and you all know what happened then, our kids were home with us. And at that point, I was kind of thinking to myself, well, if I have my kids at home and I have to teach my kids, then I'm going to teach my kids the way I want to teach my kids. I'm not going to be trying to follow whatever the school is sending. I need to make it work for my family and for my kids. And so for the next 2.5 months, we did we were kind of trial homeschooling. I used some of the stuff that was sent home from school, but my kids all had IEPs, so the teachers really didn't expect us to do a certain amount or certain things. So we just kind of worked with the teachers, but we kind of did our own thing for those 2.5 months. And by the end of the 2.5 months, I talked to my husband and I said to him, you can't deny that our kids are doing so much better here at home than they were at school. I didn't talk about how many problems we had trying to get our kids to be okay at school. For years, I'd get phone calls from teachers, and I have 2 kids with ADHD and 1 with anxiety, and just insecurities, and then or overly social behaviors, and getting in trouble for that. And then add my son who has autism, and he was actually in the life skills class, even though he cognitively has no issue learning. I actually chose to keep him in the life skills class because he was such a handful. He would just run off, he would disappear, they would find him looking in the window from outside of the school. He would toss tables, he would hurt other students when he got upset or overstimulated, and these were things that he would never have done at home. And so I was in the school all the time trying to help. I was hoping that if I was there, I could reinforce kind of what the expected behaviors that we have at home that also apply to school. But it was just really hard to try to get my kids to be able to fit within the school system. I mean, even my daughter, who is from Taiwan and has no cognitive issues, she actually is they consider her highly capable, and she learns very easily. But even her, she cried every day from preschool up until 3rd grade. At some point, she might still tear up thinking about wanting to be home with me. So she did fine at school, but she was still not wanting to be separated for so long, and she wanted to be home with me. And so during that short period of our 2.5 months of pandemic schooling, we just saw such a change in our kids, especially our oldest, who struggles with anxiety, and just seeing how much she was learning and how she had these gaps, but we were able to progress. Oops, I'm dripping coffee. How we were able to progress and how much improvement she made during that 2.5 months, just being in a safe and secure environment. She was happier. We had less drama, less outbursts. And so we really saw the benefit of having our kids home with us during that time. So going into the new school year in 2020, we were trying to decide if I could handle all 4 all the time. And originally we were thinking, let's just do the girls and we can slowly integrate the boys once I get the girls more independent, since it'll be a new thing for them. But when we heard about the schedule that the school was going to do, they were going to do 4 half days on and then a week off online, and then 4 half days on and a week off online. And I just knew that that was not going to work for my boys or my kids who need that just really stable environment and just very routine. And I knew, especially for my son with autism, that would not work. It would take him all 4 days to get used to being at school, and he already couldn't handle school. So I knew I had to do all 4 kids. So last year in August of 2020, I started homeschooling my 4 kids. And it has been a wonderful, wonderful, life-changing. I think it's going to change our family. I know it's going to change our family forever. It's been a great experience. It's been a hard experience, as you would expect, but it is so worth it. And I'm so glad that we're doing it now. And it's very hard for me to imagine a situation where I would think that my kids being back in public school would be a better situation for them. So I'm not going to say we would never go back, but I cannot imagine it myself. So yeah, so that's kind of how we got to where we got. So I would love to hear from you. What led you to homeschooling? Or if you haven't started homeschooling yet, what are some things that, obviously you're researching it or you would not be watching this video. What are some things that are keeping you from jumping into it? Just tell us in the comments below what pushed you over the edge as we got pushed over the edge, or what are some things that are keeping you from taking that leap? I'm sure there are people who could give you advice, and I would love to have a chat with you if you'd like to. So just leave those in the comments below, and please stick around. Next video is going to be about 6 things that surprised me when I first started homeschooling, and I was a homeschooled kid myself, and still I have a number of things that were surprising when I first started. So please like and subscribe if you're interested in seeing that next video. And thanks for being here today. See you later. Bye-bye.